places my body hadn't sold. Many miles away, I could start a perfect story. I found myself and find out glory. This deceptive world, giving me the sign, giving me the sign. Giving me the sign, giving me the sign.
Welcome everyone tonight. Welcome to the Sci-Fi Queens show, where we will explore the female characters in sci-fi TV shows, movies, books, art, comic books, animation, anywhere there's a female character in science fiction. We will be there exploring it. My name is Nita, and if you are new to our channel, we welcome you and we ask that you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when our next shows are coming on. Tonight, joining me is our regular guest, Sarah, joining me tonight to talk about sci-fi in comics. This is very exciting for us because it's a new platform for us to talk about. It's a new area, and we're going to specifically talk about the comic book Paper Girls, which also is on Amazon Prime as a one season series. It did not take off past one season, but if you're interested in watching it, is there. But you can find the comic books in your local library, in Google Books. That's where I got it from, and it's actually a pretty fantastic series. And Sarah and I read the whole complete edition. And we're going to be talking about that tonight. Navia is not with us tonight because she's on vacation. So wish her lots of fun. She's in India visiting family. And Annie, as you know, guys, she's taking a little hiatus. Uh, she should be back in October. She's been working 10, 12-hour shifts. So, keep your happy thoughts and prayers for her. Those ER shifts are tough. As we all know, she is a nurse. But she will be back with new book recommendations. Okay. And now is, of course, returning to us with more amazing female scientists. And Sarah, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you, Nita?
Good. Glad it's Friday. Glad to be here on the podcast. So,
Yes.
Sarah, talk to me. I want to thank you for being our guest and for always being willing to be on and participate. This is so much fun. She is our visiting sci-fi queen. She needs a tiara too. Devin needs to get you a tiara. I don't know. He needs to
Okay.
get you a tiara.
I'll tell him tomorrow.
That's right. So tell me, what did you think of the Paper Girls comic?
Well, I went into it not knowing anything at all because I figured it was something that you had picked that was right in the right category, but I'd never even heard of it. So I went into it blindly, and I was kind of by it, if that makes sense. That
Hmm.
it wasn't what I was expected, but it was pleasant. I liked it.
Yeah, I liked it too. I went into it never having read it or seen the Amazon Prime series either. Actually, a suggestion came from Navia when we were creating our shows to do a comic book, and we looked and we found Paper Girls because we wanted it to be female centered and science fiction. And these are young girls. These
Mhm.
are what, teens, right?
They're
Early
12.
teens. Yeah, so they're
Tw-
early teens. I would say that's
yeah,
early
preteen.
teens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're four unlikely friends, I would say. So, when you read this, what were you expecting versus what you got?
Well, I didn't really have any expectations. I figured there would be some sci-fi in it somewhere, but it was almost confusing, but in a good way, that they were moving forwards and backwards in time and traveling, and later on in the story, things that happened earlier in the story finally make sense, like any good time travel story. um but they were breaking the norm, because at that time in 1988, when the story takes place, uh there weren't a lot of girl paper boys. There weren't, paper girls. There were paper boys. And
Yes.
in the story, Mac is the first paper girl to break that mold. So this
Mm-hmm.
was a new field. And then, I mean, look what she spawned. She spawned all these other paper girls to
Yeah.
become independent and make their own money and not just have to be babysitters. So it was kind of
Exactly.
breaking that female prerequisite or mold. You know what I'm trying to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I saw that too because I mean I remember 1988. There were no paper girls in
Mm-mm.
1988. Paper boys, yes, but not paper girls at all. So this character really did break that mold, and it was so good to read, and the illustration in this comic is amazing. Okay,
Yeah, I
guys,
thought it was really good.
very well done, very vivid, very alive. Um, and very true. Something sometimes with comics, the characters look very they look animated. They don't look like people. So these characters look like people.
Yes. They're more realistic instead
Yes.
of cartoony. And
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I thought it was fantastic. I also got a little bit thrown because, you know, I wasn't sure the sci-fi element. I knew there was sci-fi in it, but I didn't know what sci-fi we were going to encounter. Were they going to be in space? Was there going to be
right.
an invasion? Like what was I did
Right.
not have the last thing on my mind was time travel. Not a lot of writers want to write about time travel because it is a confusing topic, right? Um,
Right.
and they didn't just time travel, they went back and forth and back and forth.
Back and forth and back and forth.
Yes,
And yeah.
but they
Oh,
got the elements of time really, really well. When they were in 1988, the what they encountered and what they saw, what they
right.
experienced was true to
They got
1988.
the periods that they got, the times that
Mm-hmm.
they traveled to, they actually fit. So that was
Yes,
good.
absolutely. And now, one of the things that I found that was very surprising was that they encountered themselves.
Their older
Because
selves, yeah.
always in science fiction, the last thing you ever do is meet yourself in the
Right.
future, right? If you go to the future, you avoid yourself, you avoid your life. This is kind of like time travel protocol. But these
101, yeah.
girls, they didn't time travel purposely. They got thrown into this atmosphere of time travel inadvertently. And by time traveling, they committed a temporal crime. And there's this temporal war going on that no one really knows about because it's all in secret. And they get trapped in the middle of it and they meet themselves in the future. And it made me stop to think, what if I would have met myself, my younger self of 1988,
Ooh.
would meet myself today? What would I say to myself? What would you say to little 1988 Sarah if you met her today?
You will live, you will survive. Just, I mean, that's the best advice I could give her, because there's so much that I've been through personally in my 43 years that, probably would have taken a lesser person down, but I just didn't quit. And that's what I would tell my younger self, is that it's going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's something I don't know. I thought about what would I say to myself? Would I warn myself? Would I? And I said, you know what? I think I'll do things differently. I think I'll tell her not to do this and to this. And then I stopped myself and I go, but I don't know what outcome that will produce. That doesn't
Right.
mean that the emotional state and the emotional drama or trauma that I went through wouldn't happen because I took a different path. Because
So
the idea is that you go through this because you don't know, right?
Right. And that's like those posts you see, take the red pill and go back to your younger self and do it over, or take the blue pill and $5 million right now. Give
Exactly.
give me the money, because and not that I'm greedy, but because even if I went back to do it all over again, I'd have to do everything exactly the same to get my child and to get to where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, one misstep and I don't have her.
Exactly. Exactly. And these are the things that I thought about. And then what advice would I give myself, you know? And I'm going to be completely honest. I couldn't come up with an advice for my 1988 self. And I'm about to be 52 next week. Okay. And I couldn't come up with anything that I felt that was reasonable. I couldn't think of anything that was, uh, you know, um, that would make a difference.
Well, and then like when they did meet their younger selves, like Mac didn't, because of reasons. I don't know if we don't want to spoil that for
Yeah,
people, but
well,
but
we could talk about that. We could talk a little bit
um
about that because the complete series is we won't give too many details away. But Mac's story, I think, is something that we should talk about because when you talk about the future, I think she had huge expectations for
for
herself.
herself, and then
Um,
she just
but she was gonna die in 4 years. They went from I think it was what 1988 to
16,
2016, and she found
and then
her
they
brother,
yeah,
and then she finds out she died 4 years.
yeah.
She had been dead
Or
for
was it was 2000, maybe, because they went to 2002. They went
yeah.
to they went to Y2K and they went to 2016, but I think they went to 2016 first.
They went to 2016 first, and that's when she found out she was gonna die. And her optimism of wanting to go home suddenly changed.
Right. Because she's just like, well, I don't have anything to live
Yeah,
for.
yeah,
Why should I even bother?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
then the other ones, Erin met herself, and
Oh,
she
poor
was very
Erin.
disappointed. She was disappointed in her. She's like, well, you still work for the paper? What the heck? You know,
Yep, Erin is here. I don't have an individual photo of Erin, but Erin finds herself and is completely um,
underwhelming.
disappointed in who she becomes. And it was that encounter that
It's
made me
tough.
think, would I be disappointed with myself if
Right.
1988 me came and met me? Like it made me think, you know? However, uh, Tiffany had a whole different. She was high on who she thought she had become until she found out the truth.
Right. And that was sad.
Mhm. That was really sad. Tell me about how you felt about that.
Well, it was just when she finally met herself, I think it was in 2000, because they didn't find her the
In
first time.
2000. Hmm.
Um, and you know, she had her other self was just kind of listless, I guess. And that
Oh, for
and
context, Tiffany is very type A, studious, good grades, focused on college. She wants to be valedictorian. She wants to go to MIT. She wants this. She
yeah,
wants that. She has these very specific career goals.
and then she just doesn't have a job. She's married, and she, has tattoos and dreads, and not that that's a bad thing, but just not what she expected for herself, even just being a party girl and hanging out, and that, she went to go get more beer, and just like,
Exactly. Exactly. And these are the things that, this comic was excellent. It didn't just provide this interesting story because there were adventures and there was fighting and there was action in between all of these stories that we're sharing with you guys. But it really did tell you a story about yourself. You know, are we where we want to be? do we still want the same things that we wanted when we were younger? Is it okay that we're not where we wanted to be? These are the questions that kind of stirred up in me these characters. Now, this young lady, give me one second, me fire Casey, had one of the most interesting stories.
I think so too. She had a huge arc, and she wasn't what I expected. I don't know what I expected, but just a lacrosse player and kind of, I don't know,
Yeah.
sporty spice guys, kind of, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
she really had a lot going on at home too, you know, with all of her strict religious upbringing and the strictures she had at home, and then being able to be a paper girl, and that gave her some freedom and some personal identity,
Independence.
independence, and I kind of think a different identity than what was always expected of her.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and they got bullied. These girls got bullied by by boys. Okay. And in today's culture, bullying is really frowned upon in a way that in 1988 it really wasn't. In 1988, bullying was thought of as being a rite of passage, and you stand up to bullies and it makes you tougher. No one
Yeah.
really, adults didn't really get too involved with with their kids bullying like they do today. And I think that we do need to stop the bullying. I think bullying today is gone from it is surpassed bullying to a place where it really does damage you. And I think that we're learning that now, the damage that the bullying does. And I think that these girls were experiencing that, you know, um, because they were just doing a job and they couldn't get the respect that a boy would because they were girls, which was very common in 1988. Again, really true to the timeline. The writer was quite true to the timeline, and I thought that was really excellent, very excellent. And how did you feel when you started reading, and it starts out with bullying?
I was like, but I mean, I also remember growing up and being, I mean, I was 8 in 1988, so I kind of, I do remember that kind of feel being around there, and like how these girls would actually, they were scared, but not like how girls today are scared. I guess it was more of how, because of the bullies and getting egged. It's not
Yeah.
anything, it wasn't anything more sinister. It was just that, or even being beat up because they were doing a job that boys were supposed to do. But it wasn't, I mean, it was, it was a little confusing. That's where I was confused. I'm like, okay, we're starting with this, but we're gonna get to sci-fi somehow.
Yeah, exactly. That's what threw me off. I'm like, it was very specific the genre this was in. I'm like, where is the sci-fi?
Yeah, I mean,
Because when we picked this comic, when Navi and I picked this comic, we picked it because it was under that genre. Neither one of us had read the comic. These are the things that we do. We have meetings, we set this up, we pick stuff we've never seen, because we like to be surprised with the audience, right?
right.
And introduce new things. This is a comic book that is so adult centered. I mean, you think of comic books being for kids. This is something that I think young girls should read.
Yeah, and it actually,
Absolutely.
I was looking at it after I finished it. I was looking at the information. It actually won some sort of prize for um, young adult fiction.
Look at that. Now you have a young daughter around
Yes.
their age. How would you feel if she read this? Like, as a mom, would you recommend this for children that are 12, like the girls that we are seeing here?
Yeah, I think that she should read it because that'll teach her that, those things aren't normal. They're not okay. And look, you can still have independence. And it turns out through all of this that they find themselves, and then they stay strong through all of it, and then it comes full circle.
Yeah.
um so that's a good part about this story, is that it does come full circle, and back to, I mean, literally right back to where it started.
Yeah. And one of the things that I find very interesting about this comic is that it really teaches us a social construct also,
Mhm.
because it teaches us about the inequality that was happening in 1988. If because they were getting paid less than the boys too.
Yes.
Okay. And I actually
And
took the
they
liberty.
all address their different ethnic backgrounds too, because
Yeah.
like Mac is has a drunken mother and drunken father, and her older brother's kind of a deadbeat look like, and she doesn't live in very good of a house. So I'd say that she's probably low income, and and then Aaron is the Asian family on the block,
The
and
immigrant family,
the
mom
immigrant
doesn't
from,
speak English very
right.
well,
And
dad's passed away, and she's
yeah, like
working
the
to help.
yeah, and they're trying to, but they're even afraid to talk to their neighbors because they're afraid of being that family.
Hmm.
And um and then KJ with her religious background, and she went to a special school, and that
And
was
yeah, she was viewed as coming from money, coming from
right, because
means.
the town, like three of the things in the town were named, had the same name as
Hmm.
her family, and she's like, well, yeah, my grandpa
And then Tiffany's
was
overachiever.
right, because she was adopted, so she wants to um
Hmm.
prove herself to her new family.
Exactly. And I actually took the time to binge watch the Amazon series. It only has like 8 episodes. Um, and it was really
Sorry,
good. It's really good.
I did
Um,
start it, but I haven't.
It's actually very true. If you read the comic first, like I did, it really is true to the storyline. It keeps it in line, which I like. That's why I thought it was very sad that it didn't have a season two, because the comic book does finish the story. And brings them back home. The idea is that they're just trying to get back to 1988. They're trying to get back home.
Yes.
Um, and they're trying to not be a part of this uh,
Temporal
temporal
war.
war,
Yeah.
which they don't go too much into in the comic. I think they could have done more. But you
Um,
see how they were bringing in um, animals from like prehistoric time through this temporal
Rift.
rift, right?
Yeah.
To help fight the battle and sending them back. And it was chaotic. And these
And it
12
was.
year old girls going through what they're coming from, having to face this, and then learning the things about their future that they learned, especially Mac,
Yes.
um, who finds out she dies of brain cancer. Um, it it was really sad, and I think that they go through everything we go through from preteens to adulthood. They were going through it in a matter of days,
Hours.
hours.
And yeah, hours, days even.
Yeah, because we all realize when we don't accomplish something that we wanted from a young age, because certain things just change, right? Life changes. Maybe you wanted to be a runner, and now you have severe arthritis, and you can't run anymore, and you can't do, whatever it is, right? And you
Right.
can't accomplish that which you set out to accomplish for whatever reason. That makes you feel some kind of way, right? And you
Yes.
go through a process. They get to experience that in seconds, as opposed to allowing themselves the time needed to heal and to say, you know what, I didn't accomplish this, but I will accomplish it this way, or I will do this instead. They didn't get that chance. They got thrown into their future without perspective. And you see that with Tiffany, uh,
And and
young
du-
Tiffany and older
and
Tiffany.
yeah, double O Tiff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 002 Tiff.
Yeah.
You see that in their conversation where she's like coming to terms with it. She's come to terms with the choices she made, and she's accepted who she is. And young her is like, Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
She
Well,
was not having it.
well, and then when Double O Tiff decided that she was going to go back with them to 1988 to stop all this stuff that normally happened, I'm like, we got to let
Yeah.
that happen, because that's like a big no.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they were already talking to themselves, so that was a no. But it was like, we're gonna let her come back and stop 9/11 and stop the Unabomber and stop whatever else was going on. I don't know what else they mentioned, but I know those two were the big ones. And talking about how people, I don't know, it was very strange and very against all the temporal time travel rules that we are accustomed to.
Yes, as sci-fi queens who have seen almost every sci-fi, good and bad, out there.
Right.
The one thing you don't do is you don't go looking yourself up and you don't change the past.
Right.
Because it creates a new timeline and that could be worse, right?
Right. And so
that's what practically she wanted to do. She wanted to change the past so that the future would be different.
And what the character of grandfather, what he said is that they had tried, and then even the girls that were helping, that were stop their super future selves, that wanted them to end the war. They even said that it wasn't causing new timelines. It was like a tape, like a cassette tape, how you can record over it and record over
Yes.
it. But every time you record over it, it kind of gets a little funky.
Yes.
And, so many times they'd tried so many times to rewrite the timeline. And that's what the war was about, because the one side didn't want any, felt that we really shouldn't change anything, because the time should flow the way the time should flow. And then the other group was like, well, let's go back and change stuff.
Yeah. And I thought that that's a good analogy that he made. And let me explain it for young people who never used a cassette tape. It matters. A cassette tape has this thin
ribbon
ribbon in it, right? And you could go back, rewind it, and re-record songs back and forth over it. But the more you do that, the ribbon becomes thinner and it becomes weaker. The sound quality decayed, and you could even break it.
And you could get duplicate echoes too, or like,
yes.
and you'd be listening to rock, but you'd hear a like an instrumental, like Mozart in the background. Something. Yeah, you just,
because it's not able anymore to record it clearly, right?
Right, it's not able to erase it.
Saying you can't fully change the past to correct the future, because it leaves echoes, and then the timeline gets thinner and thinner, and you're going to break the universe. That's what they were trying to say. And I know that they were to me, they were trying to bring them, kind of presenting them like the villain.
They kind of were until the
but
end.
I kind of think the other ones were the villains, because I think that they were right. Changing the past does not correct the future. Just correct your present.
I know grandfather was supposed to, grandfather and the Watchers is what they were called, were supposedly the bad guys, because they wouldn't let any alterations happen. But I think that they were actually protecting the timeline, and that's where the other, and there was what I saw, what I gathered was the people that the kids, the boys, was it Heck and Naldo? That were first when they first ran into them, they were just scavenging stuff, because they were doing a cleansing anyways. So they were just there scavenging stuff, and they ended up getting caught, and then the girls got pulled into it. But they weren't, I know that grandfather looked at them as terrorists, but I don't think that they were terrorists either. I think that they were more along the lines of just kind of making the best out of what they could, and just picking up the trash.
I think so. I think that the other side wasn't necessarily the villains. I think they were misguided. I think they truly believed that if they changed the past, they can correct the future and all of the trauma and suffering that was happening wouldn't happen.
But it doesn't work that way because
But it
you're
doesn't work that way.
here. You're
Hmm.
here. So for you to be here, that has to happen. So
Exactly. And that's what the Watchers was trying to convey. I think the Watchers was too aggressive with them, in saying that it was some sort of temporal crime, and arrest anyone, like blindly arrest.
meanwhile, the Watchers were going and like snatching up dinosaurs right before the asteroid hit
Exactly.
and bringing them to keep them as pets. It's like, because it doesn't make an impact on the timeline. Well, it's like, wait, you're that's when they were talking about that. I'm like, now wait a minute, you're doing exactly what those kids were doing,
Exactly.
except you're just doing it more precisely.
Yep.
That'd be like going into
And it does make a difference in the timeline because they had their time. They are extinct. They died. We know we only have fossils. If you bring that animal that you can't tame or you can't domesticate back into the future, what do you think is going to happen? Chaos.
oh yeah,
Chaos, right? and
yes.
and that's what we see in this book. It really does give you this perspective. Let's say hello to some of our viewers that we have here. We've got United Federation of Planets. How you doing, buddy? And he says, I need to start reading more comics. That's right, and so do I absolutely do. And our friend Jace, Commander Jace, how are you?
Yeah.
What's going on? Thank you guys for joining us today. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you. You cannot change. And one thing that I thought was lacking in the comic story was that they kept talking about this future that was so terrible, but they didn't take the girls that far into the future so that they can see it.
No, yeah, they didn't see the terrible future. They just saw way past it, and when they were looking at their and they were doing the genetic duplicates, or
Exactly.
and it's
Hmm.
just like, well, what happened and how did we get from there to here? Oh, well, we don't talk about that.
Yeah. And
Well,
that's what was very secretive. And I'm wondering what is it that was in the minds of the writer when they wrote the storyline that way. Like, uh, because we got the complete series. Unless you're gonna come out with volume two, I want to know what's going on. you know?
well, and there's I'm it's almost like, all these movies that we watch that are post-apocalyptic, they sometimes they just don't even tell us what happened. It's after the apocalypse, but like,
Yes.
you know and it's just that's it starts from there and goes on. And this one, it starts way before it, and then it like skips that, and then we're way in the future, and it's like, I
Yep.
it left me wondering, like, what's going on. I
Yeah,
don't
it did.
understand.
Yeah, and I didn't. If now, correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't also explain very clearly to me, and maybe you got more out of it. Um, why was it that the girls were not affected by the mind erasing red light when it first happened in 1988
um
before they move forward?
because they were in the basement, and that's, remember,
Oh, that's right. The light has to enter their eyes.
yes.
Yes.
Because that lady Caroline said, come down in the basement or you get your brain wiped. And that's why the first time travel capsule was in the basement, so that they wouldn't get.
Mind wiped. Yes.
Yes. So
Yep.
I mean, it was just,
And I absolutely love these characters. The outfits are so 1980s.
they
Uh,
are.
the hair.
I
Um,
had I had Aaron's hair, I think, with the poofy bangs.
Yes, I think we all did. um, but it definitely was something that was uh a, I love the accuracy of it all, and the science was amazing. Once you got into the science, it was actually really good.
Well, yeah, and just like, and it was almost all their machines were almost bioneural, like how they used that on
Voyager.
Voyager. Yeah, they were all living, but also machines, not
Mm,
really like cyborg, but just that bioneural, using them to work together.
yep, because it computes faster apparently.
Well, maybe.
Well, that's what Voyager says. That's why they transfer certain systems to binaural, because it was faster. It processes faster the information. How much faster can you get from their computers? I don't know what they were trying to get to, but
I don't know. Well, and then we'll look at Discovery. Isn't their computer is an independent AI now and is alive?
yes, but it's not binaural.
No, but it is alive by all
It is
intents and,
alive because it's an IA,
or
an
yeah, and it,
AI,
yeah,
AI,
and but
artificial
it's the
intelligence.
same kind
Hmm.
of going the same directions with it. It's
Oh
just
yeah, absolutely. It was going in the same direction. But I like that you could tell that these writers really knew their sci-fi.
yes, it wasn't just made up, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like, I don't know, say the Twilight Saga, and that's how she'd never read anything about vampires ever before she wrote it.
Yes.
And so it's like, then you're reading and it's like, what is all this? It's I mean, which it worked because it was different, but it doesn't go along those same, like with this, how they,
Traditional
right,
path. Yes.
yeah, and that what
Hmm.
and this writer seemed to stick to most of that, except for the whole find yourself in the future thing.
But you see, that kind of works for me in a way.
It
Think of it this way. They are talking about 12-year-old girls who kind of got thrown and thrusted into this reality, right?
mhm.
So it would make sense that they will reach out to someone they know. Who better than
Look,
themselves?
yeah, who can we trust here except
Yeah, we're
ourselves?
not talking about girls that were older and know about these things, or were even sci-fi geeks. I mean, none of them were.
None. Yeah, no.
So this actually, if you really think about it, it makes sense for the characters to do that, right?
Yes.
Um, and I really think that it was a real good social commentary on a lot of things. They really
Well,
wrote the female characters as women, as how girls behaved in 1988. And when you see them jump from time to time and find themselves, this is how women behaved during these times. It made sense to me. It was relatable. It didn't undermine them. It didn't make them weak. It didn't make them all, it really wrote a very classy level of female characters.
well,
And that
and
was
then they
something I
even
appreciated.
their character development was phenomenal
Oh,
for
phenomenal.
um from where they came from, just being strangers that are paper girls that are going to deliver together for safety on Hell Night, the night after Halloween, and where they became to at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought that that was really great. The whole concept of four strangers sticking together because they're girls and they're all being picked on a day that these things happen.
Yes,
No?
because
Yeah. And I found it very interesting that these boys who did not have to wake up at 4 in the morning woke up just to bully them.
I think that they were still. I think the whole thing was they were still out causing mischief after Halloween.
Probably that would make more sense.
Yeah, because they were talking about getting egged in the face and getting knocked off their bikes and getting their papers stolen and stuff like that.
Exactly. Exactly. And that makes perfect sense to me. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't really. I never really did Halloween, so growing up, so I don't know if that's actually something that kids did, stay out all night. What is your experience with that?
I always I wasn't allowed because we were, I was an only child, so I was made to come home. I didn't live in those movie towns where well, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's very typical. It's always the toilet papering and the egging, and it's like that was never a thing where I grew up, but
me
I
neither.
mean, it may have been elsewhere. I just know it wasn't for me. Um, and I know that they have some mischief on Halloween night, but nothing too terrible has ever really happened anywhere I've lived.
Oh, okay. See, yeah, I didn't grow up in an area where that was prevalent. It's so that wasn't something that I experienced either, like watching, you know. And I think in 1988 I was in Puerto Rico, and in 1988 in Puerto Rico, Halloween was not a big deal in the country. I grew up in the country, so it was not a
Yeah,
big deal. Maybe in the city like San Juan or Ponce, the bigger cities,
yeah,
maybe they did Halloween, but that's really more of a Western culture. I don't know. I know it's
yeah.
American. I don't know if other parts of the world
And
does
the
Halloween.
story takes place in Cleveland, Ohio. So that kind of sets the middle America Western culture. Basically, it was
Exactly.
it was the kind of boiled down to this is kind of what America's like at this time. And I mean, I don't know that was 100% accurate, but when I think of Halloween in the 80s, I do think of that but that's always because that's how it's been portrayed
In
in
the
media.
movies, yes, in
Yeah,
media, that's right. And that was another thing that I noticed about this comic is the portrayal of these female characters was not conducive to what female characters were portrayed like in the media during the
no,
80s.
no, they were
They
very,
were really normal. Like you saw TV in the 80s. No female character behaved the way these people behaved. It's
no,
like,
these,
who are these people? Who thinks that way, who does that, right?
mhm.
Because they were being written by individuals that were coming from bringing in past behavior into present time, right, to perpetuate the stereotype of female behavior. But these characters were true to how girls behaved, and when I thought that that was really amazing.
That's one of the things I liked about it, that it wasn't the stereotypical 80s girls, even in their attitude, in their jobs, any of that. Because when I think of girls in the 80s, I think the Babysitters Club and Sweet Valley
Yes,
High,
yes.
and it, that kind of, you know what I'm trying to say, that kind of era, that's what girls were supposed to do.
The
Only,
Brady Bunch,
yeah, only,
or Full House, things like that.
and Step by Step,
Step
and
by step,
yeah,
yes.
step by step.
And not one person I knew said or behaved like any of those people.
No, but we were entertained by it and we watched
Oh,
it,
absolutely.
and it kind of makes you wonder, was that what they were trying to make us think that we were supposed to be?
Exactly. But here you have this comic, which I think,
That just
again,
breaks the mold. And
breaks the mold. I think that this comic is fantastic, not just for women to read, because it really begins to feel very nostalgic, right? um, but I think that it's something that mothers and daughters can read together, um, and it's enjoyable for all, male, female, whatever, however you identify. It is an enjoyable comic for anyone, and he seemed to like it too.
well,
But he
he's been
he's
very quiet, so we've
yes,
been good.
yes, he's a sci-fi king.
Yes.
um but it's a book that I definitely think mothers should read with their daughters. It's a comic book, so it's not intense. It's reading. There's a lot of visual. with the reading, lots of pictures, and if your teen maybe not interested in reading, this might be a way of getting them interested in reading. Is getting them comic books, and getting them to see themselves in these comics are pretty amazing. Now you're a mom, you've got
Yeah.
a preteen. How do you feel about what I just said? What are your thoughts?
I think I will read it with Leah now that I've finished it. I will read it with my daughter because it would show her what the possibilities are.
Yeah, it'll get her thinking, her brain.
Right. I mean, she already reads she reads a lot of comic books. She likes them. She's been reading Miles Morales lately.
Oh, okay.
So that's what she does like comics, and sometimes it makes it easier to read because comic books have just as many words as total words as regular books. They did a study, but they're easier for some people to digest.
Yeah, I think so because it's also laid out more conversationally, with the bubbles. Like, this
Right.
person is saying this and this person is saying this. I think that's something that teens that have trouble focusing. That's something that they can focus on.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. But we are coming to the end of the show, but I do want to say thank you again to Sara for being a visiting sci-fi queen. Now, I do want to say that our next show will be October 6th at 8 p.m. Sara will be back with us, and we will be talking about sci-fi and gaming. Okay, so we're going to talk about female characters in sci-fi gaming and what it is to be a female gamer and how different that is, because it has been traditionally a male populated activity. So we're going to be talking about that. That's October 6th, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you again for joining us, and you guys have a good night. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our new channel so that you can get notified when new videos come up. Thank you for watching our show.